Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see everybody. Thanks for being here today. All right, well, let's see. We'll give Eric just a minute here. Just an FYI to everyone, Jacqueline from Ed Northwest couldn't be here today, but Eric Stiefeter will be filling in her place. I don't see him yet. I'll give him just a minute, and then if he doesn't, I jump on, we'll get started, and I'm sure he'll be jumping on shortly. There he is.
Yep. Hi. Apologies, everyone. I was not yet a panelist. So yes, I'm Eric Stiefeter filling in for Jacqueline this week. Nice to see you all. I see some familiar faces and names on the screen. So happy to be working with Zach today and providing whatever support I can.
All right. So yeah, we'll go ahead and just do the roll call. And we'll start with Gary.
Yeah, good morning. Gary Lucene, Bozeman School Trustee, and good morning, everybody.
Kirk.
Hey, good morning. This is Kirk Miller. I'm the Executive Director of School Administrators of Montana here in Helena. Happy to be rejoining here. I missed the last couple meetings.
Yeah, good to see you today, Kirk. Lisa.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Schmidt from Conrad. I'm a community member and interested in education, and I'm glad to be here this morning.
Thank you, Lisa. Mary.
Hi, Mary Ducharme, Natural Transitions Consulting, Assistive Technology Representative and Occupational Therapist.
Good morning. Thank you, Mary. Kari.
You said it right. Thank you. Kari Orendorf, Montana State University Health Enhancement. Thank you.
Thank you, Kari. Gail.
Gail Stephenson from Sydney, Montana. Nice to be here.
All right. Allison.
Good morning, Allison Harmon, Dean of College of Education, Health and Human Development at Montana State University.
All right. Thank you, Allison. Laura.
Hi, Laura Poser Brown, grade 5 through 8 teacher librarian in Lewistown.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Mr. Jay Eagleman. Oh, good morning, Jay. I don't know if you heard me. It looks like you might be muted. All right, Stevie.
I'm here from Rocky Mountain College.
Good morning. Looks like Cheryl Allen is joining us today.
Good morning, everyone. Cheryl Allen, the Office of Public Instruction. Happy to see your joyful faces.
And I see Jennifer Smith is here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jennifer. Tristan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tristan Belknap. I am the deputy's executive assistant, and I'm here to help you out with anything that you need.
All right, thank you, Tristan. And I'm Zach Hawkins, Director of Indian Ed for All at the OPI, and I've been asked to co-facilitate this.
Hey, Zach, we just had Kieran jump on as well.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Kieran.
Good morning. My name is Karen O'Mara, and I am an elementary teacher librarian at Beartooth Elementary in Billings.
Glad
Good
you're
morning,
here.
Karen.
Glad you're here, Karen.
Karen,
Okay.
this is Jennifer Smith. I'm on here too.
Hi, Jennifer.
All right. Did I miss anybody? All right, and in that case, we will go ahead and get started. Just really quickly, I will kind of give a quick recap of what we talked about in the recommendations that were made last week, specifically in section 501 of the ARM. And I'll also give an update on the feedback group meeting, some of the things that were shared on Monday. I think we'll kind of pick up on that conversation around the American Sign Language endorsement, and then also a little bit about the social emotional learning language. There was some conversation last week about that we didn't want to specifically endorse the Danielson framework, but perhaps just look at some of the critical elements of social emotional learning and think about where we might weave those into the ARM. So have that conversation and vote and record any possible recommendations that come out of that conversation. Also discuss, go back to lever topic 2, some of the ARM language there, and the possible recommendation of a year-long internship or pilot or something like that. And if we have time, I don't know that we will, but if we do, we can begin sort of talking about lever topic 2 before we wrap up today. Are there any questions or comments regarding the agenda? Okay. So I'll share a little bit with regard to some of the things that folks expressed during Monday's feedback group meeting. One of the things was around the idea that, we can make changes to chapter 58 and kind of, hold the EPPs, accountable for certain changes that kind of fit the vision of this task force and sort of the direction that we want to go. But that there also needs to be sort of an equal effort on the K-12 side, as far as our administrators supporting educators as they transition into the workforce in those areas, things like social emotional learning, college and career readiness. How does that look in the K-12 setting in terms of teachers being evaluated and provided opportunity for continuous growth in those areas? There was some conversation about EPAS. There was varying opinions about the rollout and the support as schools took that on and how effective it was and things like that. But just I think the broader point being that this change will not happen if it's put solely on the EPPs. Also, the idea of inductions, that period of time as teachers step into the classroom, of having, again, an opportunity to grow within the school system as they advance. And that this just hasn't really been something that Montana's talked about, but other states do this. Elimination of the term learning style and continuous improvement, replaced with personalized learning and continuous growth. In terms of, there's just when we talk about creating a subchapter around ESL, creating a chapter around tribal language endorsements, between now and October, that's a heavy lift. Just some conversation around that. And the bulk of student teacher placements going to A and AA schools. It's harder to get rural school placements. So when we're talking about diversity of experience, just a thought process around how do we really by design ensure that there's more placements in rural schools. And then just that chapter 58 and chapter 55 need to be aligned. And again, back to that idea that whatever this vision is, here in this task force, that we need to understand that there has to be sort of a corresponding strategy within the K-12 system and, with accreditation and in other ways. Two things really quick. I just want to note that McCall Flynn has joined us. Good morning, McCall.
Hi, Zach. Sorry I'm late. Thank you.
That's okay. And then I did want to share, since Cheryl is here and we had a conversation yesterday, kind of going back to that fourth bullet around creating subchapters. The approach of this task force will be that we will get as much of chapter 58 addressed as we can as we go through the lever topics. But if we have not gone through comprehensively and made all of the changes, by the time we get to September, October, there will be this will be a continuous cycle under Superintendent Arnson, and other sections of chapter 58 would be addressed by a subsequent task force. Cheryl, did I state that accurately?
Yes, that we start looking at the continuous cycle because we recognize that some of the elements the task force is working on are going to take longer than a few months to complete. So we will get to the point with the key changes you believe are most vital, and then we will revamp and continue work.
All right, thank you for clarifying that, Cheryl. So are there any questions, comments, thoughts regarding that or just the feedback group recap that I've shared?
Looks like Gary has his hand up, Zach.
Okay, thank you. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. I'm curious, what's the makeup of the feedback group, and is there the people on that group? Are they mainly people with content knowledge and stuff?
I think they're very similar to this group. That they come from a broad spectrum, classroom teachers, administrators, stakeholders. My understanding is that we had a lot of folks that wanted to be a part of this task force, and obviously we couldn't have everybody, and so they were given that role of being a feedback group. But in terms of sort of their background and makeup, they're very similar to this task force.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments or questions before we move on?
Like Mary also has her hand up there.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, you mentioned Indigenous learning and you wanted to replace it. I just talked to Jim Warner from the Lakota tribe, and he said that Montana is the only state in the union that does have the Native American education. So I think that should be emphasized and not removed.
All right, thank you for that comment, Mary. Anybody else? Okay. In that case, we will move on. So this is kind of where we left off last week. Just again, a quick recap. Originally in 501 Part A, there was a recommendation to incorporate the Danielson framework for social emotional learning. That conversation sort of landed in a place of we don't necessarily in our arm want to endorse a specific framework. but really more look at what are the critical elements of social emotional learning, and how do we incorporate those into the ARM language somewhere. And then there was a conversation around American Sign Language and possibly either a subchapter in the ARM related to that, or possibly under the umbrella of other world languages, or possibly addressed in some other way. So we can continue that conversation today. And then, is there other things around lever topic 1 that, should fit somewhere in the ARM language? And I think what I'll do here in just a moment is I will stop sharing my PowerPoint and jump over and bring that wonderful tracking document that Tristan has created up, so folks can look at that as we have this discussion. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yes.
Give me just a second here. All right, so can everybody see that okay? So you can see that the changes that were change recommendations last week were to 1058-501. And so kind of where it landed in part A was to insert something along the lines of differentiate developmentally appropriate instruction for learners of all abilities based on evidence-based practice. For B, to add the word language. For L, also to add the word language with relation to American Indians and tribes in Montana. And then the recommendation to add a subchapter around ESL and Indigenous language endorsements. And you can see that there's a note down there, add a subchapter around ASL at a later time. So I guess I would entertain some discussion around where American Sign Language might fit in this.
Like Laura has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Laura. Thank you, Eric.
Hi, everyone. So again, Laura from Lewistown. And my thought with the ESL, one of the things that came up last week was whether or not Montana School for the Deaf and Blind felt this was something that was needed. And I'm not sure that I agree with that assessment. As someone who's taught in schools and worked for 3 years with kids who are nonverbal in regular Montana public school settings, the request for sign language to be taught is being driven by students who are considered regular ed, or students who may have a couple special needs in education, but are not deaf or unable to verbally communicate. So when I suggest that we consider adding an ASL endorsement, I would request that people consider it from the umbrella of, we teach all languages that we can in Montana. You can take German, you can take Latin, you can take French, you can take Spanish. And I don't understand why having an ESL endorsement would not fall under that as just another language. I don't see. Now, that being said, Zach started this meeting, a few comments in, by talking about, the concept of endorsements and what's the practicality of an endorsement, especially by October. And I think that's something for Cheryl and Zach and other OPI folks to fill us in on. I, for one, am totally naive about how the endorsement process works in Montana, for how we add endorsements to the state and how we add endorsements at the college level and university level. So before I push too hard on that ASL endorsement that I do think should be added at some point in the near future, I would like to hear more from university, college, and OPI folks on how that happens. I feel that also pertains strongly to adding an Indigenous language endorsement. How does that happen? How financially feasible is that at our universities? How capable are we going to be of getting professors at our universities or adjuncts to teach those courses? I would really like to know more about the endorsement process and how that ties in with recommendations we're making. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like Gary has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious if we could enlarge the screen a little bit so we can.
Okay, let me see.
See
if
that.
I- Yeah,
Thank you.
is that better? Jennifer has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond a little bit to the Indigenous language piece. We've been talking about this quite a bit with MACI, with Montana Advisory Council on Indian Education, because we want to really try and expand the opportunity for folks to get that Class 7 licensure, and also to support those folks that have a Class 7 in order to be able to get more professional development around that. So we're talking about opportunities, ways we can do that, which would involve some conferences, things like that, that are specifically focused on the Class 7 licensure. That licensure is done through the tribes, and each tribe has their own set of standards that we're looking into, trying to figure out some sort of a more standardized way of determining how the licensure is approved. But largely that's left to the tribes in order to approve that licensure. And they have their own assessment tools and resources that are going to be a little bit different based on the tribe and the language. But we have been talking quite a bit about trying to develop that to a larger degree. One of the things that we're up against, of course, is we're losing a lot of our Indigenous language speakers. There's been a big push by Senator Windy Boy to try and put some funding towards really developing programs, developing those Class 7 teachers and increasing the opportunities also for students to participate in some of those language programs and trying to get them into the schools as well. I don't even remember who it was, might have been Dr. Cummins, but he pointed out it seems awkward and that, in some of our schools on reservation, we're unable to even offer the language. And instead of kids learning their Indigenous language, they're having to take other foreign languages such as Spanish or French or something that is not even when they're not even learning their own Indigenous language. So we're working on that in terms of trying to figure out better ways to create more opportunities for students as well. So just a little bit of background on where we're at with the Indigenous language piece, both for students and opportunities for them to learn their own language, but also a push towards trying to support our Class 7 licensed teachers as well.
All right, thank you for that background information, Jennifer. I believe Allison had her hand up next.
Thanks, Zach. So I just want to give a little bit of a university perspective on the questions that I think was Laura that posed earlier. So the Chapter 58 really in the standards are a roadmap for us to develop curriculum. And so we won't develop curriculum if there isn't an endorsement. We don't have the resources and we wouldn't have the capacity to do that. But if there's an endorsement, that gives us a reason to do it. And then we have to gather the resources to support that. It's not a mandate for us to have an endorsement. We don't have endorsements in everything. We couldn't possibly, and we don't want to be too redundant across the state. But if there's an endorsement, that gives us a reason to do it. And that's why this is helpful. I want to mention in response, I think it was Jennifer who was just talking about Class 7, which gives elders without teaching preparation the ability to teach languages in schools. And I wanted to just let the group know that we have a professor here at MSU, Dr. Ioana Carjuza, who offers an institute every summer that allows folks to get that Class 7 license. And so that's one of the ways that we're supporting that piece here. About ASL, so American Sign Language, would be supportive of adding that. I think that it's most appropriately placed under world languages. So that's what it is. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Susan, I believe, had her hand up next. You're muted, Susan.
I was going to reiterate some of what Alison had said, is that the university would look at what the state standards were, and then determine if we have the expertise in our college to meet those standards. If we're looking at American Sign Language, I mean, we do have an interpreter who does offer courses for students on campus. So she would probably be the go-to person, but we would have to develop a proposal that would have to, if we were going to offer an endorsement, the proposal would have to go through faculty and administrative review, which would include information on what the need was for this. So we'd have to do some market research. We'd put together a proposal, which would then go up the chain and presumably and ultimately to the Board of Regents. So it wouldn't, and as Alison said, just because there is an endorsement on state books, that does not mean every institution has to offer that. And so it may well be that our administration would determine that it's such a specialty that maybe we wouldn't be able to offer it because we didn't have the resources.
Okay, thank you. I believe Stevie has her hand up.
I do. Thanks, Zach. First of all, clarifying, our conversation around this endorsement has been for not for the license 7, correct? It's been for a standard license 2. If that's the case, I just want to clarify that we already have the 7 and that serves a purpose as well. But what we were talking about was for a standard license 2.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and then I wanted to just confirm and agree with both Susan and Allison that again, the process would be to put together a proposal to do a needs assessment and see what kind of demand there is for this particular endorsement, and then see if we have the expertise, the resources, and the demand to take on the step of the class, plus all the faculty and administrative approval that would go with it. So it would not be a quick process for us in any way, but also we'd have to really define what we mean by Indigenous language. Are we talking about an endorsement that covers every Montana-based Indigenous language, or is it just already encompassed in the world language piece? I think there's a lot of questions we still have to answer on the university side before we would be moving ahead.
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points, and thank you, Stevie. So I think, Laura, did that answer your question? I mean, just kind of going back to where this conversation started. On the EPP side, do you feel like you have a good understanding?
Yes, I feel much better about that. And I really appreciated Stevie just clarifying about the Indigenous languages endorsement, because I was getting confused in that with talking about the class 7 that the tribes can do versus the class 2 that is pretty much handled by the state and with the EPPs. So I appreciated that. We still haven't touched very much on the ESL endorsement, but that's not my Bollywood.
Yeah, so I think with all of these, you know, the EPPs are going to kind of look at that and make a decision regarding whether they want to offer, you know, instruction in those areas for that endorsement. But that's all going to be based on, you know, what language ultimately goes into the ARM around these topics, and then, you know, ultimately is signed off on, you know, through the recommendation of the superintendent and voted on by the Board of Public Ed. And then from there, you know, then it becomes sort of an official endorsement in the state of Montana. With just really quick, with regard to some of the comments around, you know, the Indigenous language endorsement and sort of how would the university system or the EPPs that are out there, you know, how would they sort of address that by getting, you know, tribal language speaking faculty and that sort of thing. I think, you know, those opportunities would most likely have to come in collaboration with the tribes and the tribal colleges. But there probably is potential for students to, you know, learn and experience that content even remotely through tribal college faculty or something like that. So I just throw that out there. And it looks like Gary has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just curious, one of the speakers previously mentioned something similar to like what the market is needing. So to me, that means our schools needing and wanting sign language teachers to teach. So is there, if we give an endorsement and universities pursue this, then is there a need in our districts for this, for American Sign Language? And I'm not opposed to that, but I'm just curious about the market. And I just see a higher market level on the Indigenous language component, but I'm just curious if that's part of the process in even developing a subchapter.
Thank you, Gary, for that. I believe Kari has her hand up.
I think there would be a need for the ASL. All of my students that come in from other states get really excited when I do a little bit of signing in my classes because they took it in their high schools because it was offered. So I think if we offer it, like nobody knows there's a need for ASL because they don't really know they're missing it. But if we were to offer that, I think they would really enjoy it as well. Because like I said, most of my students from out of state have taken it in high school and they really, they love it and they enjoy being able to converse in it.
All right, thank you, Kari. Stevie, did you have another comment or was your hand still up from before?
No, I do have another comment. I'm not certain, Zach, but perhaps you know. I think some of the tribal colleges are currently offering or intending to offer Indigenous language as an elective in their preparation for elementary ed or what have you. So I think that's something we should try to determine as well, because I think there's some work out there in the field that's happening already.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I can't speak specifically around each tribal college and what they're offering, but I do know, I believe it's Stonechild College has an education program, and I'm curious if Jay, are you on, and can you speak to that at all?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go to the Stonechild College website, there's an individual who produced an associate strategy to gain an associate's in Ne'io language from Stonechild. So all of that is comes from an A&A grant. So she's got the entirety of the kind of like the goals and objective of the offering. So, and I want you to take this as a whatever, some food. If they're offering a secondary associates, but at the foundational level, the K through 12 level, the NAEO class is still an elective, and it's still described as other world languages. You know, I think that speaks to the amount of work that needs to happen within the tribal communities, as well as within organizations or groups of people such as ours, where we are creating synergy as to how it is that we might be able to help the tribe salvage portions of their heritage language, while at the same time, which is really important here, is we increase the capacity of our tribal students then and their ability to read. So we're emphasizing not only English language, but we're also concentrating heavily on the maintenance of what's left of each of the tribes' languages. So if you go to their website, you know, I think that's the effort there.
And thank you for that, Jay. And so, but if there's students at Stonechild that are pursuing an education degree, they're not necessarily required to take the tribal language?
Actually, I think, you know, to even add clarity to that, if I understood correctly, and I'm not a board member of Stonechild, I don't, you know, I've got much affiliation with them. However, as a part of that process, then the class 7s that will be coming from this particular reservation, according to the literature, they'll have to gain their education through this associates if they want to maintain their class 7 endorsement or whatever approval from the tribe. So that's the way it's being structured now. And I don't know that as official, but that's what I have heard.
Okay, thank you for providing that, Jay. Appreciate it. Laura, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes, not a share, but a question. I was speaking with someone last week, and right now in the ARM, we've established, we're in chapter 58, but in the subchapters of the 500s, 501 is like the broad view for teaching, but then there are specific content areas like agriculture and business and English. There's one for health and a separate one for PE. And so I was a little confused because I noticed this is not an exhaustive list of the endorsements that are allowed in Montana or that are granted by the state. And so I was curious, where are some of the other endorsements, the requirements for them, where are those listed, if not here in the chapter 58 subsection 500? And then as we talk about endorsements, is this the appropriate place actually for them to go, since not all endorsement requirements are listed in here? Thank you.
Yeah, to answer your question specifically about where there's a comprehensive list of endorsements. Cheryl, can you possibly speak to that a little bit?
So for the list of endorsements related to licensing, we find that in licensure itself. And that's one of the elements that as candidates apply for licensing, they can also check endorsement areas. And we can certainly get that and have Tristan post it into the Google site.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Cheryl.
Zach, this is Laura again. I'm not sure that actually answered what my question is.
Okay.
My question is when we specifically list out the requirements for endorsement. So maybe it was Allison earlier was talking about here in the ARN language is the roadmap for how the universities plan their instruction. So where are those roadmaps provided by the state, those requirements? And why are not all of those requirements for all endorsements listed here in Chapter 58, subsection 500s?
I can't necessarily answer that. So I know we spoke, I think, about the that there was some endorsements, for example, like middle, like I think it was called middle grades or communication that don't necessarily correspond with a specific licensure endorsement at the OPI. But I may have to do some more digging on that, but I see that it looks like Stevie has her hand up. Maybe not.
Yeah, so this is Cheryl. Laura, specifically, what are you looking for in subsection 5? Because there is the endorsement area that gives some guidance. Are you looking for the specific classes that are needed to be taken? What is it exactly that you're seeking?
So the screen that Zach is sharing right now is the crosswalk, I think, or the tracker lever topic. But if we were to go into actual Chapter 58, for example, I have an endorsement in psychology. The psychology endorsement is not listed with its requirements here in the 500s. It doesn't exist, even though it's an endorsement. And so how do you know what the requirements are from the state for an endorsement? I'm not talking about classes. I'm talking about content. Sure. When they aren't listed in here.
So when they're not in 58, you're going to find those in 57 and licensing.
Okay. And so how do we determine where an endorsement falls, if it falls in Chapter 57 or 58?
So one of the elements that we would need to consider is sometimes endorsements in psychology can definitely be a subset of the social sciences arenas as well. Sometimes a subset in psychology may show up over in those pursuing Class 6 work. So I don't know that there's a simple answer to that. That's what we're trying to navigate through with the different chapters today.
Okay.
But thank you. Great questions.
Definitely. I believe Allison has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to try to help. Ann Eubank posted a message. All of the endorsement areas that are authorized by BP that EPPs can offer are in Chapter 58. So you have an endorsement in something that, you know, like Cheryl was saying, it could be a sub of another endorsement, or is that something that you earned in Montana? I guess that would be a question I'd have.
Yes, I did earn mine in Montana.
Stevie? Where is she? I think maybe she just has her hand up and stepped away for a minute.
So let me follow up on that then, Zach, because there's social studies broad field that also includes psychology.
Correct. Yep.
That's where you see some things that might be hidden.
Right. So it would be under social studies, but then it would be a subset of that that content area with a special endorsement, essentially. So I think I don't see that I have any more hands up. So I'm just curious if we feel like you know, we're kind of back to the sign language. Yeah, I think that the last week, you know, it was like we need to talk about this more. I'm curious if this task force is now at a place where they want to make a recommendation around sign language. Whether it be for a subchapter or some other way. I see Mary has her hand up.
So we are just talking about teaching sign language to students and not addressing giving sign languages to those hearing impaired.
I think we're just talking about articulating it as an endorsement option somewhere in the arm.
And the reason being for students that have interest in ASL or for students with hearing impairments?
I would say both.
Okay, because I mentioned at the end of last session that we don't necessarily have to have a teacher to do the ASL signing. It's not required, but if you're teaching the ASL, then that's a different story. Because we can use other paraprofessionals to do the signing.
Right. So currently you don't have to be endorsed to provide those services for hearing impaired. So this would, based on just my understanding of the conversation, this would give it kind of a broader sort of awareness and scale in terms of its pervasiveness, you know, in schools. Kari, I think, has her hand up.
And I could have only been half listening to this, but that this wouldn't be like, this would be teaching our students how to speak sign language, right? This isn't to help the students who already are deaf and hard of hearing. This would be something that we teach our students. It would be like teaching them French or teaching them Spanish or, okay, just double checking. Thank you.
Yep. Mary, did you have another question or just didn't put your hand down?
Well, you did say that it was both. You said hearing impaired and teaching the students that have interest ASL. But now you told her, the other speaker, that it's only in the interest of teaching ASL.
So I may have misspoken based on my interpretation of the conversation, Mary. But ultimately, it's up to the task force to identify what it is that they want this to be. Laura, go ahead.
Thank you. So Mary, you in Montana high schools can have a student who speaks Spanish at home, and they can still take a class in high school for Spanish. And so even though students may already have experience with ASL because they need it, because a parent has language difficulties with verbalizing or is deaf, they can still take a class. Like, this is just like taking a foreign language class, what we're proposing. So even if they have background knowledge of it or prior experience with it, they can still take it in a regular ed classroom, which is what we are proposing. Adding an endorsement so that people can teach American Sign Language to whoever wants it, whether they have background in it or not. Think of it as just adding another language endorsement in the state of Montana. So that's point one. Point two is just if anyone's waffling about the need for adding an ASL endorsement, like Kari said, when she teaches it at university level, the students are clamoring for it. It is a very popular topic. The 3 years I worked with a student who was nonverbal, he had multiple disabilities, and being nonverbal was one of them. He had peer mentors who wanted to be able to communicate with him, regular ed students who were fascinated by my ability to use sign to talk with him, and just that alternate language input of the brain. So when you think about this from an advanced education perspective, you realize that speaking with sign language is helpful for kinesthetic learners. It's helpful for learners who are highly visual. And it's also helpful just in broadening our understanding of how different people communicate, and that's okay. So we are, what's the word for it? We are regulating, making more regular, what I mean by that, the other in this situation, if we can allow kids to learn more languages. So I am a huge proponent of ASL, and if you have questions about it, I'm happy to answer them. Kari, you kind of sound like you're happy to answer questions people may have. And so when you talk about doing a market survey for this, everyone, yes, Kari and I are the ones, we both have seen it. And this is one of those, if you build it, they will come. Kids are fascinated by it. Students are fascinated by it. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, when you brought up that, I have worked with kids with nonverbal autism, and I have used sign language. So that in that respect, yes, I understand that would be a good thing for other students to know, so that they could communicate to those people who are nonverbal. You're right.
Right, I think Lisa has her hand up.
I do. Thank you, Zach. I support creating an endorsement for ASL. I think that's really important. My question is, when universities accept high school graduates, when they look at their applications, and having 2 years of a second language gives the applicant a leg up, are universities recognizing ASL as a second language when they look at applicants?
That's a good question, and I don't know that we have anyone on here. Maybe we have someone from post-secondary that might be able to answer that.
Well, and if I can keep
Go
going.
ahead. Yep.
Excuse me. Maybe if we had an endorsement and we had a bunch of kids who become fluent in ASL, that might help universities accept that as a second language. And maybe we can be the leaders toward more acceptance and diversity and a broader understanding of both verbal and nonverbal language. So I see it as a win. I'd love to help Allison figure out how to create the curriculum for that.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Let's go to Kieran.
I just wanted to say, I guess, from my perspective, I taught early childhood in a Montessori classroom, and it was a regular thing. Every week we had 10 new signs. The kids absolutely loved it. The parents absolutely loved it. And in my experience as an elementary school librarian, anytime you use sign languages or sign language, the kids eat it up. They absolutely love it. Like I had to go buy so many sign language books for the library because I think one thing that's really important to remember is that children have a hard time sometimes accessing the prefrontal cortex, especially if they are in trauma or crisis or, just having a lot of feelings. And I've seen ASL make a difference because that's something they can access. They can speak without having to worry about their tone of voice or, somebody saying, don't take that attitude with me. So that's yet another reason why I think it would be amazing if we could offer it, because I think there is an interest and a lot of people would be interested in taking it. Even if they don't go on to get an endorsement, it just improves our ability to communicate with each other. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you. Why don't we go to Susan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I didn't think that our university offered that, but Anne Eubank just posted in the chat a list of universities that do recognize that. So it wouldn't be, I don't know, there would just be some administrative things that the university system would have to do, I'm assuming, to have that recognized in Montana. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Anne. Allison.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say, so Anne posted that exhaustive list, so that's wonderful. But to my knowledge, we don't accept that here at MSU. But what Lisa's saying is correct. That things change. These are all moving parts that are connected to one another. So if ASL becomes an endorsement and we I'll start to offer programs in it, then that you're going to see that change.
Okay. And let's see. Oh, Kari, it looks like her hand is down. Mary.
Yes, I feel, I guess there isn't a whole lot of, I don't know. Is there well, I know the rural does have pre-education or pre-K for special education children, but not pre-K for everybody. With the special education children, a lot of them are speech impaired. So, if you're going to teach ASL, we want to be able to teach ASL basic, at very basic at first, and then, then get into more complicated afterwards. But just the very basics way of communicating, like finished, take a break, that type of thing, and then go on, and getting more complex as the kids mature. But early childhood and also nonverbal autism, that's when, I really think you could use it. I don't know how many people are hearing impaired that are in the regular mainstream school. Yeah. But there was something else I was going to say too, but I forgot. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thanks, Mary.
I'll just add kind of anecdotally, our daughter's high school here in Portland, Oregon does offer ASL as one of its world languages. They just offer it at a 1-2 level. It doesn't have a full pathway like Spanish does, but some schools do offer it. I wonder, does it feel, Zach, like we might be up for a vote here on this, on just a general recommendation, understanding that there are some nuances to tease out? I did post a couple of links. One is to the endorsement areas for the class 1 and 2 license. And then also the pathways or the endorsement areas in chapter 58. So probably some more homework would have to be done to figure out where exactly ASL would fit, either in licensure and or in chapter 58. But sounds like there might be some emerging consensus around this potentially.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of folks we haven't heard from, but basically the folks that we have heard from seem like they're in favor of this. So I guess if no one has objection, perhaps we could, just make a recommendation to add an endorsement around American Sign Language. I guess, first of all, does anyone in the task force have objection to that or want to make clarification on that? Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I support having sign language as an endorsement, and just would remind us to ask for public comment before we take a vote.
Yep, that's kind of where I was going next, but thank you for that reminder, Gary. And I believe, Tristan, if I call on people and ask their yay or nay vote, are you ready to record?
I sure am. I can definitely do that for you.
Okay, but before we do that, is there anyone who's attending this meeting from the public that would like to comment?
Or is there anyone on the task force who hasn't had a chance to speak on this specific topic that would like to add additional comment? Looks like Diane has her hand up. Hi, Diane.
Hi, thank you. I would just say, this is Diane Fladmo from MFPE, and I would support the efforts toward adding the endorsement for ASL.
All right. Thank you, Diane, for being here and offering that. Are there anyone else that's out there that would have a public comment with regard to this? Okay, well, in that case, I will go ahead and just when I call your name, if you would just say yay or nay, and then Tristan will tally the votes. We'll start with Mary.
Yes, but I also want to say, include in that endorsement the reason why it's important, because maybe future educators don't understand all the reasons why it is important.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Gary.
Yes.
Okay. Lisa.
Yes.
Allison.
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Kieran.
Yes.
Gail.
Yes.
Nishala.
Yes.
Stevie. We'll go to McCall,
Yes.
Kirk, Kirk, are you there? Okay, we'll go to Jennifer.
Yes.
And Emily.
Yes.
Okay, did I miss anybody?
Laura?
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry, Laura. Yes, and let's see, I think there's
Looks like
Kari.
sorry, too.
Yes.
Kari, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm a big yes.
Okay, and then Karen, did I get your vote?
Yes, and yes.
Okay, all right, thank you guys. I think it was pretty unanimous, so let me see if I can. If this is gonna let me make this change or not. So what I may have to do is figure out how to make this change, but I'll just say add endorsement around American Sign Language and just a brief rationale as outlined, as Mary kind of explained. And then once that's done, I'll let the task force know, because for some reason, I don't know that I'm able to edit this. Hold on one second.
I'm popping in. I can try and edit it for you.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So I'm wondering, Zach, if there's some potential homework we could identify around that as kind of a next step, or if a subgroup of the task force kind of wants to start taking a look at that in terms of what that would pragmatically look like. And, like start looking at the arm, specifically see where something would have to be added, understanding that, that's a long process, and we may not necessarily get to the point where we can say, okay, change the arm in these places to enable this, but maybe start looking at where that work would be done.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think we have, since we have formally, made this same recommendation around ESL and Indigenous language, that is a logical next step. I do know that previously there was as a group in general, this task force did not want to do sort of subgroups, did not want to work in that way. So yeah, I think it's something we're just going to have to kind of think about as to how we facilitate those next steps.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And it looks like folks have kind of pitched in some ideas already and some resources. So like Lisa suggests, adding that list of universities that accept ASL. Yeah, and we could potentially pull together some resources as well here at the Comp Center to help support that. Thinking through what that process would look like and building the rationale.
Okay.
I was thinking of subcommittees because the Chapter 57 task force did break into subcommittees. So, but each of the task force has their own norms. So, okay. So sounds like that might be an area where the Comp Center could help pull some resources in.
Okay. Any comments, questions, thoughts from the task force?
I was originally confused when they mentioned the Montana School of the Deaf and Blind, and then I guess I got geared toward that. And then, but, you know, there's a lot of other reasons not to address other students. And so I don't really think we need the School for the Deaf and Blind for the ASL certificate or endorsement.
Yeah, all right. I think I've heard others express that, so thank you, Mary. So any thoughts? We have about 20 minutes left today. So I guess I would just kind of, oh, Allison, go ahead.
Thanks, Zach. You know, I just was thinking about what Cheryl said at the beginning, where this is a, you know, we may not finish every piece of 58 in the time period that has been allotted for this process, but that this would be a continuous process, and then other committees would be formed. And I'm just curious about the rationale for not just taking longer to do the work instead of breaking it up and creating a process that might be disjointed, where people don't have history then when they pick it up, you know, and so continuity, I guess, would be a concern if that's the process that we're going to use. That's one comment. The second is just I know I've said this before and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we're making recommendations that are going to require the input of experts on these topics to write those endorsements. And I just want to make sure that that's included in our recommendation, that, you know, people who are in the know about Indigenous languages and sign language and ESL are going to make a contribution to that. We may not find that expertise on our task force.
Yeah, thank you for that. My understanding with regard to the timeline is that's kind of the established cycle of the Board of Public Ed. And I think what OPI will do is just explain to the Board of Public Ed, you know, that this will be a continuous cycle, that not everything in the ARM will be addressed in this cycle. But we do have, I know Cheryl and then McCall are here. Maybe they can bring some clarity to that process.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. One of the things that we're mindful of is, as this task force was developed, it was under the understanding as well that there was a start, a finite time. And so we do not want to commit people without their approval. And it definitely is something, if this task force wishes to continue, we certainly can do that, Allison, and we will be, as we have recommendations in September in front of the Board of Public Ed, also explaining what that adjusted timeline may look like as we look at that cycle. One of the things is that we have 5-year cycles, we have 7-year cycles, and we have 10-year cycles. But as we all know, waiting for the next cycle to begin isn't always the most prudent. And so that's what we're also going to discuss, is that there should be continuous cycles of work to where we pull teams together to say, here's an emerging issue that we believe needs time and attention today, not when the cycle starts again. So that was our thinking on that. Great question. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that clarification, Cheryl. So we have now just about 15 minutes. So I'm curious if, you know, if we look at this crosswalk, if folks have thoughts about the appropriate areas in, you know, the ARM to start to address social emotional learning, because that's kind of another topic that we've talked a lot about, big picture. There's a vision, I think, that this is important, and it should, you know, be something that our EPPs, you know, address by design. But I would entertain any suggestions with regard to where this might go in the ARM. Mary, did you have something to offer?
Yeah, I just wondered, And is there some place, I know the legislation isn't for it yet, but I think it's coming, where we have pre-K education, not just for special education, but for the general ed?
Are you talking about as an endorsement?
Yeah, I guess so, because there is, as I know, in Montana, there is no public pre-K, right? For normal general ed students.
No.
But I mean, I don't know. I think it should be a
Were you-
suggestion.
Yeah, did that have some, in the context of social emotional learning?
Yeah, or is there a Head Start? Is there a Head Start in Montana?
Well, there is Head Start.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe there are, I don't believe I don't believe it falls under OPI, but you know, those, there is a state sort of oversight on those programs.
Oh.
Kieran.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, it took me a second to find the mute. So just off the top, I believe that C would be one place where emotional learning could be added. In my background as a Montessori educator, creating the environment, part of creating the environment is encouraging the relationship building that needs to take place with students. So even if it's something as simple as a morning meeting where kids can all go around and quickly say, like, how was your night last night? So right away, you're getting a feel for the kids who didn't get enough sleep, didn't get to eat dinner, that kind of stuff. Because when you do that, you're with the kids are all hearing from each other and you are hearing from them. And it's like, we're all respecting each other here. And that is a huge part of creating an environment that says, you know, you matter, what's going on for you matters to me as your educator. It also helps build sort of a cohesion among the classmates where now we don't have to get mad at each other for this, that, and the other, because we are understanding that everyone comes to school from a different environment. And we can make our school environment or our classroom a place where we can learn and we can have fun and we can feel safe with each other, even if our home environment isn't that. So C is my first suggestion. And then I also was thinking maybe I was thinking maybe H, because I do feel like relationship building is an instructional strategy. However, I'm not familiar enough with, I guess, the ins and outs of the college preparatory for education for teachers, whether that actually is considered an instructional strategy, like on paper.
Okay. So you're making a recommendation to add language to C and H that would incorporate elements of SEL.
Yes.
Okay. Are there other, okay, I see that Gary has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just from a procedural standpoint, is it possible to add an M into this where it specifically outlines SEL areas?
Yeah, I would assume that if we can add subchapters, we can add an item M to a specific section. Thank you for that suggestion, Gary. Any other comments, thoughts?
Yes, on L, I can definitely L, with what Kieran was saying. I was in a Montessori classroom and I did have a kindergartner with an Eskimo heritage who did not feel he was part of the class, and that social emotional learning was very important for him, that we included him. Like I would bring in an Alaskan magazine with a fish in it, and then he would get excited, but he was just lost in the Montessori program.
Okay, thank you. Laura.
Just a quick question, not trying to be difficult. Is adding social emotional learning opening a political can of worms in our current climate? Are people going to be upset that we are deliberately including non-academic requirements? Question.
I guess others can chime in. I'll just say, I think that's part of why there's a public comment period in this process, is for the public to weigh in. And again, ultimately, the Board of Public Ed, looks at that comment and determines whether they think it's in the public interest or not. Kieran?
I can't speak to whether or not there's the political can of worms thing may or may not happen. But I know that, is it Curtis Smeby had brought up PACS, and there are some materials on PACS in our Chapter 58 Google site. PACS is actually something that our state is using. It's currently being implemented in Billings Public Schools, in all the elementary schools. And PACS is social emotional learning and relationship building. So I don't know whether or not that would cause people to be upset because it's not technically academic. But what we do know is that children they don't have space for academics if they don't feel connected and safe. And that comes out in terms of behavior. And if a teacher is spending more, most of their day managing behavior, then the learning isn't happening anyway.
Okay, thank you. Kieran, Allison?
Yeah, I would agree with what Karen just said. If I'm not mistaken, the SEL is required in the SS state plan already. We already teach it in our curriculum. And just a general response that we're working on standards for preparing teachers, and that goes way beyond academics. And so you won't be a competent teacher if you don't have some skills related to social emotional learning. And so I think if we keep our eyes on what's best for kids in Montana, I think we can avoid the political issues. We're all in this together as working on what's best for kids.
Thank you for that, Allison. And I'll just share something very briefly. Some of the PDs that I've done in the capacity of Indian Ed for All, one of the ways that I often start out the PD is asking, okay, what do you want your students to be able to know and do when they leave your classroom? Very rarely do those teachers speak of, expertise in their content areas. they talk about being able to navigate relationships successfully. They talk about things, like, intrinsic motivation, maybe, good financial knowledge and abilities. So I think it just speaks to, we have a vision. I think there's a vision articulated here of what we really feel like our students need. And I think social emotional learning is kind of a big part of that, what I've heard.
Zach, looks like Gary's had his hand up for a bit.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess as a trustee who's been dealing with the political side of this topic the last 3 or 4 weeks in our district, I would agree with Allison that I think our decisions need to be made on what's best for kids. And clearly, social emotional learning opportunities are critical. So I wouldn't worry one bit about any political backlash or anything on this at all, because it needs to be done. So I fully support it. The one question I have as I read C, I don't know what the underlying rationale was for adding that language in, but my read of that is the social emotional learning component, at least from my understanding, which is not deep in this, but there can be a wide range of needs in the classroom. So my question is whether C language is intended to address the wide disparity of needs in a district, and if a separate line item would be better to describe perhaps what the range is of needs, and make sure that the full range is captured within the subchapter language. So, and how that occurs, I have no idea. It's just a thought on reading. It seems like it would fit in there, but I'm not entirely sure it would cover everything.
Yeah, thank you for that, Gary. And I think we do have to probably make a decision as to where, if it's better to incorporate it into one of these items or to add a separate item. But I see that Emily has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I was just gonna throw out too, I mean, this is pretty consistent with where, some of the legislature has been moving to in the last couple of sessions. I think that we've done a pretty good job of getting especially leadership to understand how important it is to not just address the academic needs of students, but social emotional needs as well. And I'm thinking specifically in the 2019 session, there was a bill brought by Senator Solomon, SB 92, that really envisioned being able to include some of these elements into, well, it was for school major maintenance and voted and non-voted levies, but and in terms of school safety and security, and part of it includes, you could utilize these funds to implement a restorative justice program, for example, very much an including but not limited to list. And then I think it's also consistent with HB 351, which is the transformational learning bill, that really does envision that schools are able to implement strategies and have the funding to implement those strategies to reach students in a manner that fits their individual needs, which we obviously know includes strategies within social emotional learning. So I do think that I don't think we're getting into uncharted territory at all here. And I think that there's been pretty consistent support from legislators who really focus on education policy within the legislature. And I think that this is a very natural next step to make sure that's included in Chapter 58.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? And I think we are officially at our time. So I guess what I would propose is that when we come back next week, that we make a decision regarding, whether we just add an item M to address social emotional learning under general teaching standards, or incorporate it some other way, and that we can just pick up there. And then additionally, if folks want to do homework around social emotional learning and bring some suggestions of language or things like that to the table, that might be helpful, so that we can make a recommendation that really identifies the elements and components of social emotional learning that we want to be incorporated. So if there are no further comments or questions, I think our work here is done today. And I just want to again thank everybody for being here and for all your contributions and for the important conversations that have occurred.
Zach?
Yes, Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, before we log off, I don't know if Tristan and Cheryl are still on here, but I needed to visit with them about a different matter. They were wanting to get together to meet with me. So Tristan, Cheryl, if you're on here, I'd be happy to meet with you after we're done here.
Yep, I'm here. That would be great. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think we can jump off, and then Eric, I'll shoot you a quick email here right after we get off.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
all.
Have a great weekend.
Hi, Cheryl.